Hey, this is Jeremy with Point Extra G, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the Unmatched rules. Now, I'm not just going to sit here and read the rule book to you, but this is going to be more the things that really trick up a lot of players. I see online, on Facebook, on Reddit, on the Restoration Games Discord, where people ask a lot of questions. And a lot of these interactions can be figured out just from knowing how a lot of these basic rules of the game go. So I'm going to be going over stuff that causes a lot of players trouble there, just to kind of help games move along a bit more smoothly for you. This is not going to be going over specific card interactions, but more kind of general things that can be applied to a bunch of different things. So we're going to start off with the big one, and this is probably the biggest rule in Unmatched. It gets missed by a lot of people, even though online, on the Discord and on Reddit, this is almost become a meme. I mean, there's a podcast that took the name. Well, there was a podcast. But this is Defender resolves first. When both fighters have after combat effects on their cards, what happens? Well, Defender will go first. So really here, page 13 of the rulebook kind of lays out the entire way to resolve combat, all the different things that have to happen. You're going to have the immediate effects, which will be Defender immediate, then Attacker immediate. The during combat will be the same way. Defender during combat, Attacker during combat. You're going to apply the combat damage, which is just going to be the Attacker's value. Subtract from that the Defender's value. If you've got a positive number, you deal that much damage to the Defender. After combat effects go, and the same way, it will be the Defender's after combat, and then the Attacker's after combat. Then the cleanup phase, which is just putting your cards where they need to go, and then some things will be additional effects. These are going to be this will be things like Robin Hood's movement, Chupacabra's card draw, anything that happens after attacking that is not an after combat effect happens at this point. So I'm going to show you a combat here, and we're going to use these two cards in the combat. We'll have it be Robin Hood attacking in one example and Bigfoot attacking in the other example. We'll say that it's Robin attacking as it is right now. See that there wouldn't be any damage dealt because it'd be 3 to a 4. Bigfoot skirmish effect could happen first, where he could, push Robin Hood away there, and then this adjacent damage here won't happen because Robin Hood's not adjacent. Now, if we were to flip this around the other way and have it be where Bigfoot is attacking, we'll see that Bigfoot would get 1 damage through to Robin Hood there, this being a 4 over the 3, but then the Defender, in this case Robin Hood, his effect would go first, and he would end up being adjacent and would deal 1 damage to Bigfoot. Now Bigfoot will have still won this and will be able to either move himself away or push Robin Hood away from him. So we can see that the order that the effects resolve is very important. The next one that we'll have will be do what you can and ignore the rest. So if you had something where you draw a card and your opponent discards a card, but your opponent doesn't have any cards in their hand to discard, well, you'll still draw your card. The thing that would be a little bit different on that is that if it is an effect that the way it's written there, it requires you to do the first thing to get the second, to move your fighter to a new space in their zone and then deal damage to all the adjacent fighters. If you can't place your fighter in a new space in your zone because all the other spaces are occupied, then you wouldn't deal damage in that case, because the way that's written, those are together in one sentence and it would be one thing. Next one is may. If an effect says you may do it, then it is optional. If it doesn't say may, then you have to do it. We'll look at both of these cards here, which are going to have similar effects on them. Bigfoot says, at the end of your turn, if there are no opposing fighters in Bigfoot's zone, you may draw one card. The Bigfoot player does not have to draw that card. They may draw that card. Going to this here, at the end of your turn, draw a card. T-Rex has to draw a card. This is not may draw a card. T-Rex has to draw that card every turn at the end of their turn. So anything that says may is optional. Anything that does not say may has to be done. So the next is going to be on maneuvering. A few things on maneuvering that people get wrong. First of all, right here we can see on the back of the card, maneuver, draw a card, mandatory. Move your fighter, optional. So the draw is mandatory. Anytime that you maneuver, you have to draw a card. And as you can see here, the move is optional. You can move each of your fighters up to that move value. In this case with Bigfoot 3, up to 3 means 1 space, 2 space, 3 spaces, or 0 spaces, because 0 is up to. Doesn't matter if it's moving, if it says move up to this many spaces, if it says draw up to this many cards. Anytime you see up to, 0 is an option if you think that is what you want to do. Also on maneuvering, you get to move each of your fighters up to that number of spaces there. It's not one of your fighters. You can move Bigfoot up to 3 spaces. You can move Jackalope up to 3 spaces. It's not move both of them combined up to 3, or only move one of them. Another thing, based on the way this is worded here, you draw first and then you move your fighters. And this is a really big deal because it is better for you to draw first. You can draw, see what card you're getting, and then decide what you want to do. You can draw and then decide where you're going to go. You could even choose to boost with that card, because once you draw that card, it's in your hand, and you can boost with the card that you just drew on that maneuver. If you're going to double maneuver, you can't draw both the cards and then move double your move. You have to do each move separately. You have to draw a card, then move. Then for the second maneuver, draw a card and then move. You can't draw 2 and then move double the space, because on that first maneuver, you won't have seen that other card yet, and you won't know what it is. Next one is discard piles are public knowledge. Basically, you can look through your discard pile. Your opponent can look through your discard pile. You can look through any of them. That means in Unmatched Adventures, you can look through the villain's discard piles. It also means that those characters that have little side decks like Titania and Pandora, that you can look through those discard piles as well. You cannot skip an action. You can't take an action as a pass. On here it says you must take 2 actions. So if you're like Bruce Lee or Genie and you gain some actions and then the opponent runs away and you can't attack them, you still have to take that next action. You can't just skip it. It's really important to the game that you take all of your actions, because exhaustion is a major factor in this, and you can't skip actions to hold off exhaustion. There are a handful of characters that have a card effect that will let them skip an action, but those are going to be the only exceptions, and those are going to be very clearly stated out on the card effects. Canceling. Canceling is not retroactive. You can't cancel something that has already happened. We'll take a look at these 2 cards here from Invisible Man and Beowulf. We'll say that Invisible Man is attacking with surprise attack, which the immediately effect is cancel all effects on your opponent's card. Well, that is great. The problem is that Beowulf with Equal Grindel, his effect is an immediate effect, and it is a defensive immediately effect, which means it will happen before Invisible Man's immediate effect. So in this case, if Beowulf had the 2 rage, Beowulf could opt to spend the 2 rage to go ahead and deal that 5 damage to Invisible Man, which would really suck for Invisible Man. This cancel cannot stop this because that has already happened. Next, we're going to talk about ignoring values. We'll look at a couple cards here that do that. Little Red's What Big Eyes, which if the symbol lines up, ignores the value. And Highway Robbery, which is from Robin Hood's deck, where the outlaws can cancel the effects, but also ignore the value, ignore the defensive value of the card. So let's take a look at a card that has an ignore effect on it here, Doctor Strange's Cloak of Levitation, and let's go ahead and throw it up here against Worthy Opponent. And it doesn't really matter which one of these is being used as the attack. It will end up being the same both ways on it here. We'll say that Tomoe is attacking, so this pops up first. If Doctor Strange is adjacent to the opposing fighter, ignore the value of your opponent's card. Let's say that they are adjacent. Tomoe's card is if the opposing fighter is a hero, this card's value is 5. Well, some people would be like, well, that 5 is happening after the ignore, so it would become a 5. Well, no. This isn't setting to 0. This is ignoring. At any point when Doctor Strange's card says that it's ignoring, it doesn't matter what's happening on Tomoe's card. Okay, it can change it from a 3 to a 5. It doesn't matter. He's going to ignore it if it's a 3. He's going to ignore it if it's a 5. This could be changed to a million on the value. It would still ignore it. Ignore straight up ignores it. It doesn't matter what it does, how much it changes itself. On this one here, it doesn't matter what Beowulf does on here. He may as well not spend the rage because Doctor Strange is just going to ignore it. It doesn't matter that this says it can't be canceled. It doesn't say it can't be ignored. Ending the turn. We have some cards that have an effect that will allow it to end the turn. It means that the turn just stops right then and there. If the opponent had more actions, those actions are done because they are gone. Also, most of the cards that end turns are going to be defensive. We do have, I know there's at least one out there, like Tomoe's Witness is an end of turn that is an attack. And so if that were played on Tomoe's first action, it would end her turn there. Most of them are going to be defensive, and so it'll stop that. But also, this is an after combat effect, which is a defensive after combat effect, which means that this would happen before the opponent's after combat effect, which means you stop their after a combat effect. It does not matter if their effects can't be canceled. You're not canceling. You're just stopping the turn before it gets to that effect. That also means that certain other things won't happen. Any of the character effects that happen after an action, like Robin Hood's movement or Chupacabra's draw, that won't happen. The things that happen at the end of a turn, like Moon Knight's identity shift or T-Rex's draw, those will still happen because those happen at the end of the turn. And ending the turn triggers that. So concerning adjacency effects, let's go ahead and take this interaction right here. We'll say that for some reason Bigfoot has thrown his 6 at one of Robin's outlaws who has defended with wily fighting. Now they may be thinking, hey, I'm going to lose my outlaw, but I can at least deal the damage to Bigfoot. Well, it was a good thought, but the problem is that that outlaw will die during combat because this 6 definitely defeats them. And the damage from wily fighting is deal 1 damage to each opposing fighter adjacent to your fighter. Well, you're not adjacent if you're dead. So the outlaw's off the board. Outlaw's no longer adjacent to Bigfoot and thus cannot deal the damage to Bigfoot. Now, there's a lot of cards that do things besides dealing damage, and maybe draw a card if you're adjacent, or have some other effect go off if you're adjacent. So if your fighter is defeated, you don't get that effect because you are not adjacent if you're not on the board. So there are a lot of characters that have after combat healing. This is one of Alice's biggest cards right here, which allows her to recover 3 health, which 3 health is a lot, and that's a big deal. But you notice this is only a 2 block, be a 3 if she was small. But if Alice's health were to drop to 0 during combat, if she would take enough damage that she died from this interaction, she does not heal up from this effect. Once you're defeated, you're defeated. You can't heal a dead person. So when Alice is defeated, she can't be healed. That healing won't bring her back. There are a few characters that have some card effects that can return a defeated fighter back. Willow and Houdini being some of the most prominent ones. That's the only way that you can bring a defeated fighter back, is if there is a card effect that specifically allows for that. So let's take a look at placing versus moving. We have this scenario right here with Bigfoot, Robin Hood, and the Outlaw. If Bigfoot were to have played Skirmish here and have won, Bigfoot would be able to move himself or the attacker up to 2 spaces. Now in this case, he wouldn't be able to move. He won't be able to move himself because he's blocked in. There's no spaces for him to move. He would have to move. The opponent would be the only thing that he would be able to do. Place, however, as we have here in Disengage, would be very different. If he were to play this one against Robin Hood there, he could then choose an empty space in his zone and place himself in that space. Place is just pick up and drop into any spot in the zone, so any of the yellow or green spots in this case. That's different than the move, which is physically move all the spaces, and since he can't move through opposing fighters with that, he's kind of stuck in space there. If it were something like that, then yeah, he'd be able to move some spaces like that if he really wanted to move that way for some particular reason. Additionally, an effect that allows you to place in any space. It has to be an empty space to place into. Going off of that, it means that if Bigfoot were to play Disengage and be able to go into a new space, he would have to be placed into a new space. You could not choose to stay in the same space because that space is not empty. Printed value versus the final combat value. The printed value is going to be what's up there in the top left corner. That doesn't change. I don't care what you say, Sherlock. However, the actual final value of the card can change. As we see here on Momentous Shift, which is if the fighter started this turn in a different space, this card's value is 5 instead. So this card can change to a 5, and its combat value, that final combat value, could be 5. It's actually possible for a combat value to change multiple times on some interactions. But anytime there's something talking about the printed value, it is talking about that number up there in the top left. It doesn't care if this gets changed to a 5. The printed value is still a 3. If it says value, if there's some card that cares about the value of your opponent's card, that is going to be whatever the value is at that particular point. And once again, you go down your order of everything in the combat, using your defender resolving first and coming up with the answer that way. So now we're going to talk about what are called floating modifiers, although that's not really a term that is locked down in the rules anywhere. Don't think this is all of the floating modifiers, but this is a good chunk of them here. When Alice is big, you add 2 to the value of her attacks. When she's small, you add 1 to the value of her defense cards. Hamlet, you can add +2 to the value of his attacks when he's not to be. When Moon Knight is in Khonshu form, he adds +2 to the value of his attack cards. Invisible Man, when on a fog token, adds 1 to the value of his defense cards. Achilles, once Patroclus is defeated, adds 2 to the value of his attacks. Leshen adds 3 to the value of its attacks if it's already attacked this turn. So it's just abilities that add on values to the cards, whether they be offensive or defensive. So if we were to go into our order of resolving the combat here, it's basically going to be here right after the cards during combat effects resolve. Once those resolve, you're going to take these and then you're going to add these onto it at that point. That's why things like momentous shift, which set the value to 5, don't get overridden by this because it's tacked on after that sets it to a 5 to make it a 7 when Alice is big. And that's the way it's going to work for all of these characters that have it on their character card. And one thing here with characters that can do this defensively, with Alice and Invisible Man, we see on both of them it's add 1 to the value of her defense cards and add 1 to the value of his defense cards. If you do not defend, there is no defense card. You have no card to add the value to. You don't get a defensive 1 when you meet these. You still have a defensive 0. You have to actually defend with a card to get that buff. Okay, so Exhaustion. Exhaustion is when you need to draw a card from your deck and there is no card there to draw. First of all of your fighters take 2 damage. So that's going to be your hero and your sidekicks. If you have 1 health sidekicks, they're all going to be gone. If you're a multi-hero set like Raptors or Wayward Sisters or Cloak and Dagger, all of them take it simultaneously. Additionally, it is just drawing that will do that. It does not matter if that is a maneuver that initiates that card draw or if it is a card effect that initiates it. But it is only if it says to draw. There are some cards out there, such as this one here, which is reveal the top card of your deck, deal damage to its boost value to 1 adjacent fighter, and then put the card in your hand. You're revealing and then putting the card in your hand. You're not drawing a card, so if Hyde were to play this when there was no cards in his deck, this would basically, nothing would happen here, and this would essentially just be a pass. Is it possible to have more than 7 cards in your hand? Yes, it is. Looking at this right here, at the end of your turn, discard down to 7 cards. Okay, so at the start of your hand, if you start your turn with 7 cards in your hand, you could still maneuver and draw a card. And so you could maneuver and draw more than 7, and it'd just be at the end of your turn. If you had more than 8, you could discard. But you could have more than 8 at that point. Also, you get someone here like Genie, who has this card, draw cards equal to the amount of combat damage you took. This is designed to draw Genie a bunch of cards because this would be happening defensively. He would end up with a bunch of cards in his hand, and at the start of his next turn, he might have more than 7 cards. He does not have to discard down at that point. He discards down at the end of the turn when he has to discard down to 7. And lastly, we are going to talk about double attacks. These are going to be double attacks or bonus attacks that were in the decks of each of the fighters in Battle of Legends Volume 2. This will be an attack that has an after combat effect that triggers another attack. Now, Yananga and Achilles, those are both pretty basic here. Nothing really crazy going on with those. It's just this 3 triggers a 3 for the after combat. This is a 1 attack that triggers a 3 after combat. But if Patroclus is defeated, this does get the +2 on both of them, changing this to a 3, followed up with a 5. So we'll say in this case here that Achilles has attacked Yananga with the double attack, and Yananga defended with skirmish on test for weakness. Now, Yananga did win the combat here. Doesn't matter if Pat's defeated or not. The 4 defeats the 1 or the 3. And so Yananga says, hey, we just push Achilles away 2 spaces. Does that stop relentless assault from happening? And the answer is no. The adjacency or being in range, if it's the case of Yananga, those are not required for that second half of that attack going off. So pushing Achilles out of the way does not stop it. Moving Yanenga out of the way does not stop it. So the attacker, Achilles in this case, his value is just going to be the 3 or the 5 if Pat were defeated. And Yanenga would know exactly what that second one is and be able to throw whatever that player felt like throwing into it. So let's say in this case that Wukong had his clone throw Ruijingabong into Yanenga, and Yanenga defended with Stallion Charge. Well, what happens here? Well, obviously she's not taking any damage on this, but she gets her after combat effect first, where she can move up to 5 spaces and deal damage. So she's going to deal damage to these, which in this case is going to deal 1 damage to Wukong, but kill this clone. So what happens now? I mean, and we know that adjacency doesn't matter, but what about the fighter being there? And the answer is, if either fighter dies in the first attack, then the second attack does not happen. So in this case, Trick You would not happen because the clone would no longer be there. And really the only 2 where this could happen would be Achilles and Sun Wukong, because these are the only 2 that are any's where the sidekick can play it. Also, I forgot to add here that a cancel thrown into the first of the double attack will stop the second one from happening. That's also true of an in turn being played into it. You have to remember that is an after combat effect, so anything that stops the attackers after combat from happening will stop the second attack from happening. And that is basically the end of my list here. I think with all of these here, you're set to be able to resolve most conflicts that will happen in Unmatched, be able to figure out how things are going to properly go from that point. There's still some niche cases out there where there's some that aren't obvious, but this is going to get you through most all of it there. These rules here will answer 90% of the questions that I see posted online. So if you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up and a like. You can go down into the comment section and let me know what you think down there. And you can also subscribe to my channel to make sure you catch all the videos that I post so you don't miss anything. This is Jeremy with To The Tabletop, and we'll see you around next time.